Yo, what's going on, guys? Teachers here, and in today's video, I'm bringing you guys something a little bit different than what you probably used to seeing from a lot of people. I had a conversation with another community figure, OG Lucky, about the topic of burnout, and we talk about a wide range of different things within this video. So I hope you guys can watch it to the end. I hope you enjoy it, and just let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, what do you currently know about burnout? Like, give me kind of like just a quick run through of like what your understanding is and like what you think about it.
Well, I think there's a few answers to that.
Hmm.
There's obviously the clinical definitions, but I don't want to bore anyone with that. For me, what it means, I think, is something that I can answer easier.
Yeah.
Um, is overworking to the point where your work is no longer enjoyable.
I think that's a pretty good definition. I would definitely would accept that as like um definitely how would I say? Um I think it's a bit too narrow. I think it I
Yeah, it is. It definitely is narrow. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't really thought the haven't really thought about the question until 5 seconds ago.
No, you're good. No, yeah. I mean,
The
I think it's a good thing. Like, I think it's good that you kind of have your own like definition of it, and I think it's a good thing that you can kind of think through that. But
and for me, it's something that I've had a habit of doing throughout my life.
yeah,
When I do something, I do it 110%,
right.
and the there's pros and cons to that. The
Yep.
pros are that I'm effective and I get a lot done.
Yep.
The cons are that the lifespan of whatever I'm doing is shorter than it probably should be because I'm driving at a cliff at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. No, I mean, and
Um,
I totally understand that because I've been the same way
right.
in a lot of different avenues. And I think a lot of people in this community, I think a lot of people in general, I think just in general in life, if you find any sort of success and you reach, a high tier, a high echelon in your work, I think you're going to experience that at some time.
You're going to have to.
Yeah.
The external pressures, and they're depending upon where you live in this country, and this is, if you live in rural Iowa, your chances of encountering burnout, I think, are less than if you live in metropolitan Miami or Manhattan,
Right.
um, because the external pressures are so much greater. It costs 5 times more to live here in Miami than it costs to live in Iowa, for example.
Right.
And while you can earn more um, with what I do and what you do, I'd be making the exact fucking same in Iowa as I make here.
Right. Exactly.
So, and believe me, I've thought about moving to a place that costs less
Mm.
to live in. And that forces me to work more and harder,
Yep.
which has forced me into that cliff at 100 miles an hour a few times.
Of course.
Um, Last year, what I was saying when I responded to your post was that I had really been experiencing burnout this year, and it's true, and it comes from last year where I streamed 221 days in a row,
Yep.
and with an average time of 7.5 hours,
Yep.
and I was successful. I got up to 200 concurrent, um, which is a very very hard number to hit on Twitch,
Right.
and but I had nothing left, man.
Yep.
And the reason I ended up breaking my streak because I was going for 365 is I wore myself down and I got sick.
Yep.
And since then,
It's funny that you say that because like there's obviously there's two types of burnout. There's physical burnout and there's mental burnout, and developing an illness is not extremely uncommon to happen, especially once you get to a certain point of being burnt out. No.
yeah,
But
it,
continue with what
it,
you're saying.
well, and I got remotivated when they changed the creative program
Mm-hmm.
because with my competitive maps, I was doing pretty well with the supporter creator, but the supporter creator where they gave you 5% of what they spend, it's not the same as them giving you 40%.
Right.
And but I've burned myself out on this too, to be honest, and mostly because I don't want to displace this too much. I'm sure
Mhm.
that some of this is on me, but my principal frustrations are one, lack of discoverability on the Epic platform,
Yep.
um, and two, the tools that they give us to do this stuff with
Yep.
break constantly.
Yep.
Um, the beginning of this season, and because I don't know how long this is going to be up, but to date this, we're in Chapter 4, Season 5 in Fortnite.
Yep.
Um, the beginning of the season, everything in creative broke. Everything.
Oh.
32 maps became unfunctional overnight.
Wow. Yeah. That's got to be frustrating. I would imagine that'd be very frustrating.
And my revenue dropped 85%, and
Yep.
it still hasn't recovered
Yep.
because through no fault of my own.
Yep.
And for the the last 2 weeks, I have literally been sitting here thinking about going back and doing something else for a living
That's
because
totally
this is
understandable.
and because I've been successful in other things in life, but I like what I'm doing, and
Yep.
mostly, I mean, there's days that I want to shoot myself in the face in game, but they're for the most part, I enjoy it, and for the most part, I like the people in the community. I'm not gonna lie, there are a lot of little toxic Timmies out there that I would happily throw in front of a bus if I had a chance in game, of course. Um, but overall, I like the people that we work with, and you and I know a lot of the same people.
Yep.
Most of them are very cool,
Yep. I agree.
but there are exceptions, and
Yep.
those exceptions, when you're a content creator, especially when you're live, can become another reason. And where I'm going with this is the external factors. Where you get the follow botters, you get the people, the hate raids, you get all these people that are trying to take you down for no other reason than they find it entertaining.
Yep. No, and it's
And
very real. Yeah.
to get to the point that you're at, or where I'm at, or anybody who's had some success as a content creator, it is the 20 hours a week that they see our face publicly. They don't see the other 60 hours a week that we're working our asses off behind the scenes to provide said content.
Oh, absolutely.
And you look at Somerset, who I think is the hardest working person in the business. I don't know how she has maintained her level of work ethic and the hours that she puts in on the regular for now 4 years straight. I don't know how she does it.
Well, I think we'll probably cover some of that today, to be honest with you, because I think that when you look at I think what you have to recognize about people in general, right, is that the variance that people talk about in terms of talent is really not as big as people make it seem. I think that if you are just a standard person, right? Like just a standard human being, if you were to learn certain things and you were to be given certain skills, then you could do what other people do. Does that make sense? And that's not to say that, some people don't stand out above the rest, but if you study their habits and patterns and you were to implement those into your own life, I believe that you would see success similar to that person because at the end of the day, it's a recognition of you're a human being, I'm a human being. Like, we're
To
really
an
not that much
extent,
different.
I agree with that. I disagree a, at one part of it, and here's why. I believe that you can teach talent, but you can't, or you can teach skill, but you can't teach talent.
Of course.
And so skill can make up 80% of it, but that other 20% is something that you're born with.
Well, yeah, but I think that I think to cover that portion of it, I think human beings naturally gravitate towards things that they're good at.
Yes, agree. Well, because they're enjoyable.
Exactly. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's what you enjoy. Like, and I think that's really a big portion of talent is hey, do you enjoy this thing? Are you passionate about this thing? Are you, I mean, you could look at regular sports and you could say, oh, well, that guy's like 6'8" and he's, um, he can run like a 4.3 40-yard dash, or he has a 45-inch vertical leap. Like, yeah, those those things are, you may have a natural proclivity towards those things, but I mean, and then what are those things in our space, right? Like the ability to be creative, having a high like level of intellect, um and but those are really the, yeah, and
Charisma,
charisma, yeah, exactly.
um, being decent at the game is important. Um, you don't have to be great at the game, but you have to be
Well,
decent.
I mean, you can create content like what you do, right? Like you create content that's not necessarily centered around, like you're not playing the game all the time. Like you're creating maps, right? So like you have a core understanding of the game, how it works, how competitive, how what people
But
who are competitive will enjoy, but you spend a lot of time, creating maps and doing stuff like that.
that's a financial decision.
Yeah.
I'll be
That's
honest with
fair.
you.
That's fair.
Um,
But
the
I'm just saying that there's other ways to be creative and to create content that aren't necessarily centered around
no,
playing the game as much. Yeah.
agreed. But the point I was trying to make it like on Twitch with live streaming,
Of course.
um, you have the people that people want to look at, e.g. the e girls.
Yep.
And I'm not taking anything away from them. I don't want anyone to take that the wrong way. There's no negative connotation there.
Yep.
But there are young men that will gravitate towards attractive girls' streams for obvious reasons.
Right.
You have those players. You have the one percenters,
The Coopers, the
polarized,
Miro.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then you have the also rans, which we have to be entertaining.
Yep.
But you still have to be good enough at the game for the average Twitch viewer to come and watch and be able to learn something about gameplay, at least for what I do. I mean,
Yep.
I just, as this is coming out of my mouth, I'm realizing that there are many different tangents that you can go down.
Yeah.
But for me,
I think that's why it's valuable to have these conversations, right? Is because you once you
they
start,
offer perspective.
exactly, and once you start to, well, it's not just that, it's also, hey, I'm verbalizing my thoughts, and now I'm like, hey, you know what, like in my head that sounded right, but now that I'm saying it, I'm realizing, oh, there's a bunch of other different routes that I could go that maybe I haven't considered, right? So
And what before I forget, there are other creative things that I would love to do that
of course,
I know that I just don't have enough hours in the day.
of course.
Um,
I think that's the struggle of being a creative person, right? Is that, you see avenues where you could apply this talent that you have, and you're like, well, damn, I kind of just have to pick one.
which is kind. I've been trying to strike a balance, and that's was the
Hmm.
point I was going to get to. Remind me of that word balance.
Yep.
Um,
Oh, it's something we're going to talk about a lot today. Yeah.
between streaming and creating maps.
Yep.
And even on my best month ever streaming, where I think my concurrent average was like 267 over the period of a month, I made less than 30% of what I make on an average month now with my maps.
I mean,
So, so you have to, as somebody who does this for a living, you have to make those decisions. You have to make some hard decisions. Say, okay, and I told my community I'm going to be streaming less. I have to.
yep.
Because I also spend a lot of money, put a lot of money back into the community with tournaments and giveaways and stuff.
Yep.
And so to support that, I have to earn somewhere else.
Of
And the
course.
stream doesn't do it.
Of course.
And because most of the community views me as somebody who's fairly financially well off anyway, I get some financial support on the stream, but not a lot.
Yep.
And I don't really look for that because the stream is kind of like the public face of what I do now, and it's not how it started, but
Right.
it's where we are now. And but to put it in perspective, what was it 3 weeks ago that we were allowed to multi-stream? I still haven't set it up. I just haven't had time. And I can double or triple my income
Yep.
overnight
Yep.
doing that, and I just haven't had
Well,
time to do
especially
it.
if you're like, I mean, I know that TikTok has been especially explosive for growth. And if you can figure out a solid marketing strategy for TikTok, I mean, I know that that is, especially if you're doing 1 minute plus videos, I know that that has been extremely financially lucrative for a lot of people recently. So,
I
um,
have been struggling with TikTok for 2.5 years.
yeah,
Um, and again, understanding that I just don't have, even doing two 30-second videos a day or one 1 minute video a day, that's an hour of work
yep,
that I don't have. So I have somebody who does, this guy Tristan has a company, and he handles all my TikTok stuff.
yeah.
Um, and so there's money going out that I have to make up for somewhere else. And so, and he's better at it than I am
Of
at
course.
short form.
Well, I mean, when you
Uh,
have money, money equals freedom, right? Because then you can outsource certain things, that you don't personally have time for. So it's understandable.
and it's also just not my strong point.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to long form videos, I'm good at it.
Yep.
I I've been editing since the days of Avids, so that's going back 30 years. But I just don't enjoy it like I enjoy creating games.
Yeah. I think that's totally understandable, and I think that that's something that, like I said, I think every person kind of finds their own niche that they enjoy and are good at. And I think that focusing on that one thing is great until you're at a place where you have the freedom to do more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
But circling back around to the point of burnout,
yep,
through my life, I've burned myself out on a lot of things.
yep,
Everything from girls, I mean that happens too.
yep.
Um,
Relationships,
but
yeah, you can burn
yeah,
yourself out in relationships.
the that you can do it with anything. The gym, I've done that.
Yep.
Aikido, when I went from striking martial arts to non-striking martial arts, I was really into the whole philosophy of Aikido, and I literally 3 hours a day every day for a year, and then I didn't fucking want to think about it anymore.
Yep.
I just hit the breaking point, and it happened like overnight with that. Poker, same story. I burned myself out. I was top 10 in the world. I retired because I was just unhappy.
Yeah.
I didn't know what city I was in from 1 week to the next because I was living out of a suitcase, traveling everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Ski racing, burned myself out. When I got to college and I got drafted to race for an NCAA team, and I kept there and I burned out.
Yep.
And I left and I moved to Florida. That's why I'm here now. Uh, it I feel like I go after things too hard, and
I think that I definitely can understand that. I can relate to it, and more than that, I can I can say that I probably do the same thing. You know, and I can feel that. I meant to say I can feel that vibe from you as well, just from our conversation.
right. And something that I've learned in as I've gotten older is the importance of, and I knew it when I was younger, but I understand it more now. Is the importance of balance.
Yep.
Um, to have personal relationships, time away from the monitors, from away from the keyboard, um, and
Well, I think
not.
time to develop your relationship with yourself too, right? Like that. I think that is probably the biggest key to, like, in my opinion, to preventing burnout. I think people talk about but I think people talk about the relationships that they have and how that can recharge them. But I think the most important relationship that you're ever gonna have in your life is the relationship that you have with yourself. And I think that that's something that a lot of people, especially in our day and age, they tend to neglect. They tend to want to fill their life with as many different things or people or hobbies or
This is a whole different topic
Yeah, of course.
because what you're talking about, I immediately thought of it as a generational thing.
Yeah,
Um, Gen X, which I was born in 1970. Um, we don't have those same issues, and the reason is we didn't have technology growing up.
I think that's fair. But
Um,
I do think that it relates to burnout as well, because you want to, like, let's say like someone like you, for example, just from like what we've talked about in this conversation, right? Like, you go super hard at things, right? And you kind of have this grind grind until I get to the top mentality, and then you've done it multiple times in multiple different avenues, but then you get to the top and you're like, well, what else is there?
next,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, it's like, and now that you found something that, you really enjoy doing, and that you've been able to kind of build something out of, and that you don't necessarily want to change from, well, now you're kind of like, okay, like that mentality is working against you a little bit, right? Like, that's kind of what I picked up on throughout this conversation.
Uh, yes, but not it. That's 30 or 40% of it.
Right.
My primary frustrations right now with what I'm doing are things. Accept the things you cannot change. Change the things you can.
Yep.
That's things that I can't change, at least not quickly. I had, and there are issues with Epic and their policies and their bugs.
Yep.
UEFN, for those of you that are out there listening, Unreal Engine Fortnite, uh, which is basically Unreal Engine Lite, um, is so buggy. It's like giving a carpenter a project to build a house and bending the saw and breaking the hammer and saying good luck. And that's really what it feels like.
I mean, will we expect anything else from Epic?
I I expected some bugginess, not the level of bugginess that I'm dealing
Understandable.
with. Because I understand there's times that I'll roll out a map and I'll miss something. It just happens.
Yep.
But 19 times out of 20, when I get an email from somebody or a DM from somebody out there in the community saying, your map's fucked, fix this. It's an Epic problem, not a Lucky problem.
Right.
And it affects my player retention, which affects my money,
Yep.
affects my reputation, and all of these affect my overall well-being.
Yeah. No, I think
And
that's fair.
and that's what it comes down to ultimately. I mean, what we're all looking for is an improved quality of life.
Yeah. No, I agree with
And
you.
and I've made a lot more money than I'm ever going to make doing this. I don't still have it, but I've
Right.
owned nightclubs, and I there was several years that I had a 7-figure income, and but I was fucking miserable, man.
Yeah. I think that's
I
fair.
was working about the same that I work now, but what I was doing was much harder, more dangerous,
Yep.
and I was constantly in court because there's a saying: the world will feed a pig but slaughter a hog.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start making above $300,000 or $400,000 a year, if something happens, you're getting sued.
Yep.
Count on it, because people in this country don't want to work; they want to take your money for nothing. Not everybody, but a lot of people. We live in a very litigious society, and I was like in the nightclub business. People ask me why I got out. Second year, I paid my lawyers more than I made. I thought it's probably time to get out of this. And it was only defending people that said that they got hurt in one of my clubs or got in a fight in the parking lot that had nothing to do with me, but because they got hurt, they're going after me or my insurance. And I'm getting off on a tangent, but
Because you have some, yeah, because it's,
I
legally
had
you have liability. Oh.
I had more money than I could spend, but I was miserable.
Yep.
And so the point that I'm making is what I strive for now that I'm in my 50s
Mm-hmm.
is reducing stress, having enough money to do what I want when I want, and that's enough, but not so much that I end up with dealing with the same problems that I dealt with before.
Of course.
Um, which you have less liability in this type of thing, but still, you become a bigger target.
Yeah. Agreed.
Whether it's got, and I just don't want that. I just want to chill. I want to take the occasional hottie to a dinner on South Beach. I want to,
Hey, I mean, I think that's what we all want, right? Like,
yeah,
we're still definitely still men at the end of the day.
And where I've gotten some energy back is I actually started focusing more on my personal life away from the game and away from content.
I think that's a very good thing to do. And I think that that is something that is definitely key to preventing burnout and well, and not just preventing it, but also managing burnout symptoms when they do occur, right? Because I think anytime that you are in a work environment that demands a lot out of you or that demands you to put a lot of time and effort in, and sometimes like the recognition and whatnot is not there, or you're having to deal with certain things that are, unfair, right? Like there's things
Right.
that we have to deal with in our work that, hey, you know what? I didn't really have any personal control over this, but I, from a public perspective, have to take accountability for this because of, X, Y, and Z, right? It doesn't matter what the reason is, but at the end of the day, it was out of your control. But you can't you can't necessarily say that, right? And it's like we all know it behind the scenes, right? But if you were to come out and publicly say it, then you get shamed or whatever for it. And I've definitely been the type of person, I'm sure you've seen my rants on Twitter going after people at times where, somebody will say something that is not true or that I don't like.
In fairness, I've never seen you go after somebody that didn't deserve it.
I well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You know,
I'm sure some of this will be familiar to you. If you want to go ahead and pull up my screen share,
yeah, I see
we'll
it.
talk
I'm
a
looking
little
at it.
bit about, and I'm sure if you've been looking at this throughout our conversation, you'll kind of see what I think you'll be able to recognize a couple of things that came up in that conversation.
I've been trying not to look at it because I didn't want it to affect the tangent of our
Yeah,
conversation.
and
But
influence that.
yeah,
Yeah. But like you said, work environments, workload, a lack of recognition, no time for family, and a lack of community, right? Those are
and there's one thing that I feel like needs to be added to this. It was very important for me in poker, and it's something that I had kind of forgotten its importance, but I've rediscovered, which is personal physical well-being and fitness.
I definitely agree with that because I
Um,
think when you can, and that goes back to your relationship with yourself, right? That we were talking about a little bit is like, hey, I think that's part of that. I think taking care of yourself, I think you recognize that.
well, there's that part of it, but there's also your endorphin levels are different, your hormone levels are different. There's a physiological effect
Yeah.
to your dopamine levels, every cortisol, everything is affected to the positive. Um, if you can manage to drag your ass, to do 30 minutes of cardio or go to the gym,
Yep.
5 times a week, um, which is really, really hard to do when you spend your time looking at a monitor because you become really lethargic and your ass grows roots and attaches to your
Yep.
chair.
Yep.
And but for those of you that are listening to T Church's video out there, after 2 weeks of going to the gym of dragging yourself, on week 3 you can't stop yourself.
Oh, you just feel well. You feel so much better
You
too.
have to go,
Hmm.
and you need to go.
It's a
like being
compulsion
hungry.
almost. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
No, I
and
agree
it
with you.
makes it and it makes a difference. So anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't.
No, you're good. Like I think that's something that I think we're touching on a lot of good things that I definitely wanted to talk about, like within at least covering this topic, right? Because I think, if you look at my coaching and a lot of the content that I put out and a lot of the things I talk about on social media, I mean, physical fitness is a huge one, right? Like,
And everybody out there, just for the record, this is the first time T Church and I have ever actually talked.
yeah,
I've used every coach in the business but him.
yeah,
And there's no reason for that. It's just we didn't really know each other.
yeah, no,
And we probably will work together at some point, but because I'm certainly aware of what you do and how good you are.
oh, thank you, man. I
Um,
appreciate that.
Kaio speaks very highly of you.
Yeah, I love Kaio, man. Kaio is somebody that, he's been honest with me.
He's a straight shooter.
He he respects my work. He asked me for feedback. Like those are all big things for me. In terms
Right.
of looking at other coaches that I would that I respect really at the end of the day, because that's the way that it should be done. And I've DM'd other coaches behind the scenes, to ask them how they do certain things, and I'm gonna be honest, like a lot of times I've just been met with um, either no response or a very limited response. That doesn't feel good because it's like I'm trying to create something. I'm trying to build something. I'm trying to do something just like these other guys have done. And I
Well,
obviously part of it is I'm a competitor, right? So like I understand that portion, but it's like, I think that this community would be a lot stronger if, especially like the guys that are really out there one on one working with players, and in those circles a lot, if we started looking at each other as, you know, coworkers and not competitors, you know what I'm saying? It's like the
well,
old saying, iron sharpens iron.
well, that's what. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And there are. It's like the competitive friend group chords.
Yeah, it's
Um,
exactly what it is.
Fish cord is no, not so much. Fish cord's pretty toxic, but like there's a Discord that
Yeah.
I'm in that's it's just called Discord. That's like edgy and clicks and everybody,
Yep.
and there's no toxicity, and it's all people working together.
And that's
And
that's
like and
that's
like
what we need.
right, and if those guys can do it, um, and I think I know which coaches you're talking about because I've worked with some of those that
Mm.
have that ego. Um, they feel like they've achieved a certain level of success and maybe have contracts with certain organizations that make them feel like they're at the top of the game, and they become unresponsive to even people that have worked with them before. so,
You'd be
so
surprised, man.
I understand what you're dealing with, and I understand why it's frustrating. But and I and I agree with you in the sense that they seem to not understand the synergistic relationship that you can have with your colleagues. You don't necessarily need to look at everybody as a competitor. Um,
Well, it's like I have a great amount of respect for the other coaches in the community. I mean, I think people have tried to bait me into speaking poorly about some other coaches, and I wouldn't do it,
no,
because there's,
people do that shit all the time in this community, unfortunately.
yeah. So, I mean,
Yeah.
now there's been some personal things that I've had to deal with behind the scenes, and I have gone off on some other coaches for doing some things that I felt were less than morally correct. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, like I have, like we're all dealt the same cards. We're all trying to play the same hand, right? So it's like, why would we not help each other, or at least not try to? Um, but I think,
Some people have the attitude that the audience out there is finite and that we're all competing for the same.
right, that there's a scarcity mindset there, and
Right.
that sucks. That's unfortunate. But
Yeah.
yeah, this has been a good conversation, man. But so we could talk a little bit about the signs and symptoms. I'm sure you've probably experienced a good bit of this yourself.
All of them on the left. Let's see. Let me look at the right. Not so much on the right.
Yeah, so you can
Everything
sometimes,
on the left.
I know for me, a lot of times when I start to get burnout, I start to experience that heavy, like I definitely get heavily depressed, and I've dealt with this in my coaching work before, where the relationships with the players weren't at their peak. I know I did some things, especially early on in my coaching career, that the players I was working with at the time they didn't like, but and I always tried to encourage my players to speak about those things, you know, because I'm a pretty emotionally intelligent person. I can usually pick up on when things are a little bit off within the relationship. And so I always try to encourage my players, hey, you know, if I'm doing something that you don't like or I say something that you don't like, you know, I want you to approach me about that and I want you to talk to me about that. And whether or not I necessarily agree with what you're telling me, at the very least, we can have the conversation, we can have the back and forth because I would rather have a constructive argument where we put our emotions out on the table so that way resentment, anger, jealousy, those kind of emotions are not building up.
Agreed.
And unfortunately, you know, I have had relationships with players kind of fall apart. um and it sucked and it made me feel really depressed because it was like, you know, when stuff like that happens, I kind of get stuck in that mindset of like, and this has been useful for me, right? Because it's part of the reason why I've become successful because I kind of take a lot of the responsibility onto myself and I say, okay, what could I have done differently in this situation? How could I have handled this situation differently? What more could I have done? But there's a lot of times like what you said, like with the tools that you're being given from Epic where you can't do anything differently, you know, because you did everything that you can do and there's certain things that are still outside of your control, you know, you know, outside of forcing or doing something that is probably not in the best interest of the relationship long term, right?
Sure.
So trying to force somebody to talk about how they feel or whatever. So, but you know, and that's funny because you see that feeling worthless is one of those next mental symptoms. You know, loss of pleasure, interest, concentration issues, anger, irritability. Anger is definitely a big one for me. A sense of detachment. You know, not feeling like connected and engaged with your work. I think that's something that I definitely think that that's something that a lot of people when they start to get burnout. You know, it's like, oh, the game, like, and I see this with players all the time. It's like, oh, the game's boring now. I was like, why is the game boring? Well, at its core, like when you start to unpack it, it's because, hey, I'm a competitive person. I want to succeed. And for the past 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, you know, I ascended to this level really fast. You know, like I went from placing like top 1,000 to like top 500 to like top 50. And then like now I'm in finals lobbies and I just can't seem to figure out where I'm going wrong. Right. Like I can't, you know, I'm consistently placing top 30. You know, I actually had that with a player that I helped. I'm not going to name any names in this video because I don't want to stoke the flames,
No,
but I did have that with a player, if my memory serves me correctly, that they were losing a lot of motivation and I started coaching them. They started to improve again, and that re-motivated them to continue to grind and continue to play the game.
you know what
Um,
that's referred to, in psychology and in business? The guardian at the gate.
yeah,
Um, it's the philosophy and the reality that you'll run up against resistance before your next period of growth.
yes,
It's like the plateau, and the trick is to be able to stay at it and push through and defeat the guardian at the gate,
yep,
so that you can get to the next level. And there's one other thing that, going back to what you were talking about when you were talking about animosity between people, the quote that I read, I don't know, in my late 20s that changed my life.
hmm
Um, I had been in a business partner who's a long time, very, very close personal friend who betrayed me and fucked me out of about 1,000,000 too.
yeah,
Which
that
in your
sucks.
20s is a crazy amount of money. It's
Yeah, of
still a lot of money, but it was a lot more money, 30 years ago.
course.
Uh, and the, it was debilitating the amount of hatred I was walking around with.
Yep.
And then I read, and I don't even know who said it, but the quote is, harboring animosity is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die.
Yeah. Well, and you
And
know, I'm gonna be honest with you, the way that, and I think this is part of the reason why, you know, a lot of people have, I think a lot of people have looked at me and been like, oh, you can't say certain things or you can't do certain things. And I'll look at them and pretty much give them the fingers because I'm not gonna walk around with that. If you do me wrong, I'm like, I'm gonna let you know that you did me wrong because you know that you did me wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like I'm not walking around with that. So, and I probably could handle it better in certain situations. I can think of certain situations off the top of my head where it's like, hey, you know what? I didn't really need to lose my temper there because now I can be painted in a bad light. But I'm definitely gonna let you know, hey, like, you know, if you want to try to manipulate the situation, hey, you know what? This is what you did to me. I didn't appreciate that. Here's why I didn't appreciate that. And, you know, this is gonna be the end of our relationship. You know, and I think that's the proper way to handle that. But no, I think you're absolutely right. I think harboring that resentment, harboring that anger is it's only hurting you. It's poisonous to you and it's poisonous to nobody else. So
Exactly.
but yeah, I mean, so you know, so like let's get back onto the topic of burnout just a little bit. You know, you start to feel these symptoms, and it's like, okay, now I know that burnout is like setting in, right? Like I'm getting, you know, I can't sleep as well. I'm fatigued all the time. You know, my muscles are starting to hurt. You know, my neck hurts, my back hurts. I'm starting to get headaches all the time. Like, or I'm starting to feel depressed, man. The game's getting boring. um I feel like I'm never going to be able to accomplish my goals. You know, that's the feeling of worthlessness is okay. So like now what do we do about that, right? Like what are some things that you've noticed in your life that when you started to implement them, it started to kind of cause those issues to go away? If ever, because I'm sure there's
Well, no,
you've obviously recovered from burnout before, right? Because you've gone through this cycle multiple
drinking
times.
lots of tequila. No, not that. Okay, then.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for the general audience. I'll just go ahead and give that disclaimer. And most of these guys are going to be under 21, but
um, the gym is a big one.
yep.
Uh, and the
Well, okay, so like
I
let's unpack the gym real quick. What like at the core, like let's take the science out of it. Like what
remind me to talk to you about the rule of 5 whys.
definitely
Write it
could talk
down
about that.
because it's something that I wanted to discuss with you, but we're just going off on a tangent.
Yep,
So write that down to be discussed before we end.
of
Okay, go
course.
ahead. Sorry.
So, well, like let's unpack the gym a little bit more. Like let's say like forget about the science, right? Like forget about the intellectualization and like forget about the cortisol. Like what is the gym actually doing for you?
There's a
Like
lot of things.
like yeah, so well let's talk about it. Like what is it doing for you?
Physiologically, I mean, we already talked about that with
Right.
your endorphins and your hormone levels and your dopamine and cortisol, and you sleep better, you have more energy, you look better, which helps your social life.
Yep.
Um, when you're more attractive, you're more confident, which helps you in a lot of different ways. When you're more fit, just when it comes to gaming, your response time is better.
Yep.
Your fast twitch muscle response is faster, which at my age is something I actually have to be very, very cognizant of
Mhm.
because I'm just never going to be as fast as a 15-year-old kid on Adderall.
Yep.
But
I mean, we all abuse. I'm gonna be honest. Like, even I abuse caffeine like pretty
yeah,
heavily.
no,
You have to.
bro, I have an espresso machine on my desk.
Yeah. I
I'm not
mean,
even trolling. It's it's 2 feet away from me right now.
well,
It's just
just for the sake of the video, I use pre-workout. Actually, I don't even use like standard caffeine anymore. I look for pre-workouts specifically that contain alpha GPC, which is a neurochemical that it basically helps your focus and your response time.
huh.
So
I
that's
think there was a guy in France that was trying to sell me some of that stuff in a nasal spray like a year ago.
it's dude,
Alpha GPC.
it's something that, you know, I had it for the first time and I was like, "Oh, holy shit, this stuff is good."
Let me look at this. I've got a bottle of Joe Rogan's Alpha Brain here.
Yeah, that's well, it the Alpha Brain has like I think that's the main active ingredient in it.
Yeah, let me see.
And I
And
don't know if you've
I do notice a difference with this stuff, but I'm also because I'm losing weight right now. I'm also taking hydroxycut, so I don't
Yep.
want to take them both.
well, I don't know
Because
if you've seen yeah, because there's caffeine and
right,
hydroxycut, right?
yeah.
Well,
a shit ton of it.
I don't know if you've seen the guy on Twitter, but his name is Clem. He owns that business, the Neuro Optima.
Is it alpha glycerylphosphoryl chlorine?
Yes.
Alpha GPC. Yeah, there it is.
Yep.
Yeah, 240 milligrams in this stuff, so it's about a third. Okay. All right, sorry. Go on. No, I don't know him.
So, Clem, if you end up watching this video, man, I better get a
Shout out or something.
no, I better get a free trial. Damn it. But no, it's this guy. So he studied neuroscience and chemistry at the University of Iowa. I've been following him for I don't know how long now, but well before he announced his creation of flow state. But I think he uses similar. I think
I've heard
he
of flow state.
yeah, I think he uses
okay.
similar compounds in this.
Can you make that bigger or no?
It's about as big as I can make it. It looks like he doesn't use yeah. So
Alpha GPC there it is.
yep,
910
so right there.
milligrams. Holy
Yeah.
shit, that's a lot.
That is a lot. I'm not gonna lie. But I'm sure this.
Wait, 300 milligrams of caffeine or 3,000? That's 3 grams of caffeine.
No. That's acetyltyrosine.
Okay.
That's
Okay,
that's a
just,
B
You
vitamin,
were scrolling. I was like, you just
Yeah.
did a fucking 8-ball of caffeine.
basically. Basically.
All right, sorry.
No. But no. L-tyrosine is it's another neurotransmitter.
I know what it is
yeah.
actually.
Yeah. So this is I've wanted to try this stuff for freaking ever now. Oh, it looks like it looks like he's actually doing it. It looks like he's actually doing his sample set for free right now.
Yeah,
So this video is going to be going live later today. So guys, if you do end up watching this today and you've been wanting to try some of this stuff, I definitely highly recommend this. This is probably one of the I am not a big proponent of Adderall and Vyvanse for gaming. They are drugs at the end of the day, and they are extremely addictive. I do not recommend them, even if they are.
And the other side is a steeper decline than the front side ascent was.
Yeah, well, and even if they're prescribed by your doctor, I think that if you are using them as a supplement for performance, I think that there are much healthier alternatives that can give you similar, if not better, effects than pharmaceutical chemicals, guys. So I highly recommend, if any of you guys out there are on Adderall, are on Vyvanse, try replacing that with this for a week. Just see how you feel on a daily basis. I can almost guarantee you that you will feel better. So that's my hashtag ad for the video. Clem, if you end up watching this, Clem, if you end up watching this, I hope you I hope I can get a free sample, brother.
I screwed around with Adderall a little bit in poker. My doctor, because in poker, when you're in a 5-day tournament and you're going into a final table with Phil Ivey sitting on your left the next day, who's widely considered the best tournament player to ever live, and you're not going to sleep very well.
Yep.
You're going to be thinking a lot. When there's $1 million on the line, and so I ended up getting prescribed like trazodone, and then over time became stronger and stronger benzodiazepines to help me sleep, and ended up finally at Xanax, where when I woke up I had to go the other way, and so they started giving me Adderall. So I had Xanax and Adderall, and as I finally went, this is not working, this is destructive.
Yeah.
And I stopped both and felt better. But the Adderall, while it's very, very effective for 3 or 4 weeks, it becomes less effective. You have to start to take more, and the side effects become worse and worse and worse over time.
Yep.
It's not like you get some side effects and you're like, oh, okay, I can live with these. No, in a month you're going to be a bigger asshole than you are right now.
Yep.
Because that's one of the things that really affects is how you handle your personal relationships for
Yep.
some reason. But anyway.
Well, it's because on the front end you get a massive dopamine dump from the drugs activating like the neurotransmitters in your brain, and then
cocaine.
No, it's an upper, right? Like that's
Right.
so like then your brain is drained of its natural feel good chemical, right? And then now you're just like you're crabby and you're in a mood and you don't have the patience that you normally would because you're not getting the same chemicals from those interpersonal reactions that you normally would be. So,
Agreed. Makes sense. Okay. Uh, I didn't mean to go off on that
you're
tangent.
fine, dude.
We were whittling away at a point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so well, I think what we're really talking about is okay, so like we've experienced burnout, we know what burnout is, we know what can cause it, and then we know what the symptoms are, right? So like what are some ways that we can really manage that? And we
Okay,
were kind of talking about
and I said the gym.
yeah, so we were talking about the gym a bit
And
and
diet's important.
yeah, well, and I think too, like asking about, and so what I was trying to get at with the gym is it's a dedicated time that you're going to be spending away from your setup. Because remember, this is we are talking about burnout generally speaking, but we're also trying to narrow it down to how it applies to gaming. So, when we're talking about that, it's like okay, so like not it's not just about you know taking a break from the game. It's about physically getting up, getting away from your setup, getting away from your computer because there's a whole litany of health issues that come along with sitting in front of a computer for 12 hours a day, right? It affects
Agreed.
it's going to affect the muscles in especially in your back, your neck, your shoulders, your even your arms and your legs because your legs you're not using them as much. But then even beyond that on a psychological level, it's
Uh,
you're getting time to spend with yourself and to kind of be by yourself and rest and like recharge those batteries, right? Like,
and further, which is equally important, I think, uh, if you're go to a gym, it provides an opportunity, whether you want to or not, to socialize somewhat with some of the other people who are there.
absolutely. I agree with that
Um,
100%.
and I also wanted to sidebar on your last point: lack of vitamin D, also from sunshine, from sitting in front of a
Yeah.
computer all day, every day.
100%. 100%. Um so what are some other things that you found that have helped you like kind of long term
Um,
with either recovering from burnout or like managing it like while you're going through it?
well, number one, being cognizant of it as
Yep.
it's happening is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a, you have to identify the demon first, right?
Yep.
Um, spending time with my dog, which I would just consider external socialization. Whether it's my dog or a person, it's a matter of just feeding that need that we have as social creatures,
Absolutely.
because we are social creatures, and a lot of people, especially in gaming, tend to isolate themselves.
Yep.
And I did it too, last year.
We all
Where I
do it
was,
at some point.
yeah. I It took me this year realizing, this isn't who I am. I need to make some adjustments. Um, Sometimes sleep is big, getting quality sleep. Even no matter how burned out I am, no matter how stressed out I am, if I can manage to get those 8 hours, not only am I going to feel better emotionally and mentally, and be less prone to being sick. Uh, my attitude overall is better. My awareness is better, and it allows me to, if I'm rested, it allows me to use the resources available to me to become productive again.
Yep.
In the sense that you have to. I'm trying to articulate my thought. I realize I'm kind of stammering here.
No, I
Uh,
think you're doing totally fine so far. Everything that you're saying is making perfect sense.
the when I was younger, my methods of getting myself back on track were probably more destructive than constructive.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's fair.
I don't use hard drugs. I did when I was, in my teens, and I stopped in '85 because I was addicted to cocaine.
Yep.
And so I don't touch anything hard anymore,
Hmm.
with the exception of like when the doctor gave me the Xanax, and that was quickly became a problem.
Yep.
Uh, but I can use that as an example. I was aware it was a problem, and I was aware of what I had to do to fix it.
Yep.
And burnout is the same thing, which is why I part of the reason I agreed to do this with you. What, three reasons: one, it's you; two, it's an interesting topic; and three,
Yep.
it's something that I've definitely have dealt with. Um, other things, oth- it all comes down to activities away. Everything that I'm thinking of comes down to activities away from what I'm burned out on, whether it's the gym or scuba diving or socializing or just getting in my car and going to drive just to flush the bullshit out of my brain and get new information and new data in there.
Right.
Because those things are seeds.
Absolutely.
They're creative seeds you can germinate into ideas.
Well, I know
And,
some of my best video ideas. Now, I have a process, right, for like generating video ideas. Um, but I know some of my best ideas come from driving down the road and listening to music. That's something that's been extremely therapeutic for me throughout my life is just hop in my car. And, maybe this goes back to my childhood and, because with my dad when I was growing up, he used to kind of force us to go. We just go on car rides and we just go like, we'd go look at houses or, we'd go just kind of like drive to like random places, out into the country or something like that and just,
and
enjoy
what that
nature.
does, it's like this fresh air blows through the inside of your skull and gets all the bullshit out
Yeah.
for a time,
Yeah.
not permanently, but for a time, and allows new things to germinate.
No, absolutely.
And a fresh idea can pull me out of burnout like that.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
where I'm like, I've got an idea, I got to do this,
It
and
reinvigorates you. Absolutely.
right. And sometimes that idea comes in a day, and sometimes it comes in a month.
Yeah.
It doesn't always come right away. And this month it was more like a month, because I've been dealing with so many frustrations with creative that I became overwhelmed when all 32 maps crashed
Yep.
because it was just too much to deal with. And on top of that, one of my team is in Ukraine, and he got drafted to fight in the war. He left on Monday. Uh, Another of my team is in India. He only has power half the time. And these are all things that I can't control. But it was, sometimes you end up in a snowballing situation where it's pretty easy to throw up your hands and go, I can't fucking take this.
Yep.
And when that happens, you have to turn your computer off, get up, and walk away.
Yep.
And
Come back later.
cont- yep,
Game's always gonna be there.
uh huh,
Stream's always gonna be there, and I think that that's something that I think you experienced this when you were going through your stream. This is something I'm very careful about because I actually want to stream long term. I want to create content long term. This is even like the coaching on the competitive side. Like I said, the relationships with a lot of the players have been difficult for me at times, and I haven't always handled them the best. But um, I feel as if content creation, streaming, like that's really what I'm going to be doing long term. And I think that, like you said, like when you're going for 365 and you're going 7.5 hours a day, 8 hours a day every day, I feel like that's a long time to be streaming. you know so I find that setting kind of hard boundaries on hey, like how long I'm going to stream for each day has been extremely helpful for me, kind of preventing myself from getting burnt out. And then also making sure that, hey, once I start to feel, like I've taken the past like 2 or 3 days off of streaming because, I was starting to get some shoulder and some neck pain. And I was like, I was kind of trying to push through it at first, but then I was like, I was in my back of my head, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of reverting back to old habits. Like, I can't do this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know where this path leads. Like, I need rest. And I think ultimately, I think one of the most powerful things, and this kind of leads me into what I want to talk about next. I think one of the most powerful things for preventing and managing burnout is having a schedule and and really like, and like this also ties back into, hey, this is the relationship that you have with yourself, like saying like, I'm going to work these days and I am not going to work these days, right? And if you're like me and we could work 2 weeks straight and not even bat an eye. You know what I'm saying? Like, no days off, working 12 hours a day. But at the end of those 2 weeks, you're gonna need 3 or 4 days to recover. Like, if you're being honest with yourself, you know what I'm saying? So
Agreed. And as you get older, that time becomes
expands.
greater.
Yeah, exactly. So what I've found that has been extremely effective for me, and this is something I have tried to preach to players, but they're young, they're teenagers, their bodies recover extremely quickly. So I think a lot of them feel as if they can push through things, and I think there's a pretty toxic mindset when it comes to um, working in especially in the competitive environment, that you have to be constantly working all the time, otherwise you're going to lag behind your peers. But it's not about, it's about quality, not quantity, right? It's about the quality of the hours that you put in, not the quantity of the hours. And this is something that I've been talking about fucking since I started coaching, you know? And I think this is something that is just now starting to really catch on in the community. I still think the majority of people are behind, but I think the idea is definitely starting to catch on. But saying like, hey, you know what? I'm going to stream 5 days a week. I'm going to stream for 5 hours, 4 hours. Some days I might go over that because on that particular day I was having a good time streaming. I was having fun. It didn't feel like work. Maybe I got rated and I was like, you know what? Like, fuck it. I want to stream today. I'll go 8 hours on that day. But I'm always cognizant of the fact that, hey, you know what? Sunday comes, that's my off day. Like, I'm not streaming, I'm not doing any type of work. I am gonna sit my ass on in bed and I'm gonna scroll through TikTok all day. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Of
and
course.
it's obviously doesn't have to be scrolling through TikTok. It can be whatever the hell you want it to be.
Yeah.
But I that
Whatever your guilty pleasure is.
right. But that for me has been the single most powerful tool for preventing burnout, long term, because
Proper time management.
yeah, and just making sure like, hey, well, it's not just that, it's you're working what, and it doesn't matter if you're playing a video game, if you're putting mental effort, like if you're playing a video game just to have fun and you're not really like, you're just giggling and having a good time with your friends, like, yeah, obviously you're probably gonna not, that's a bit different than
That's
going
a very
into,
different experience than streaming.
well, not just
It's a
stream.
very
Well, not just streaming, but playing competitively. A lot of these guys when they're playing the game, and I think this is the gap that you see in a lot of players, where it's like, there's, you can reach a certain level just because of the repetition, playing brainlessly and having fun, but then there's another mindset of, every single time I die, I'm thinking critically about what I could have done better and what I could have improved on, right?
and going back and checking VODs. Yeah, I get it.
And that, well, that's mental effort, right? Like that, like, so you need to have the time, like we're saying, to like wash your brain of just the bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because it's very easy, especially when you have that mindset, to get bogged down by, the, especially the gaslighting that happens like in competitive communities, because this mindset is pretty broad, and you'll say, someone might say, fuck, I play on 50 ping, right? And there's certain things that I can't do that zero ping players can do. And those zero ping players might say, oh, like, why are you complaining about this? Like, that's your fault. And it's like, you don't have the perspective of playing on 50 ping. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm gonna be honest,
I play on close to 40, and I get it.
it's like your
You're playing
perspective.
backwards the whole time.
Yeah, well, it's like your perspective is invalid. You play on zero ping and you always have. You've never experienced what it feels like to play like on this ping. So it's like, in those, it's kind of why I like Queasy, because like, I'm gonna be honest, like Queasy's, I like, he's done it to me where he has said what he thinks, I think he was wrong in what he said to me. But at the end of the day, I have to respect the fact that he says what he thinks. You know,
Fair,
like,
fair.
and that he reminds me a lot of myself in that way. So I kind of have to respect that about him. But I think you have to have a very strong but you have to have a very strong mind to succeed in this community, and I think that it's very difficult if you're not giving yourself time away to kind of detach yourself from the community and the stuff that goes
But
on and all of the
y-
mental warfare that goes on.
but everything that we're discussing requires discipline,
Of course.
and the I'm not trying to cast stones at average competitive kid A, B, or C, but the average competitive Fortnite player uh, that is part of the toxic community. I don't mean kids that are on the come up. I mean kids that are tier some tier threes, tier twos, a couple tier ones, because most of the tier ones have gotten to a point that they've figured out how to maintain.
Yep.
Um, is that the game is all they have,
Yep.
and they don't know yet how to balance with anything else.
Yep.
And there are symptoms of that too. And I think the totally different issue, but COVID and homeschooling I think has a lot to do with that, with lack of socialization for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
is definitely a big factor.
the but these I'm thinking that your average 14-year-old kid who might watch this video or is listening to me talk right now um, aren't going to be able to relate to anything that we're talking about
Oh yeah, I
because they
agree.
just don't have the life experience to understand what we're talking about. And
Yep.
for those people that are out there, don't take it as discouraging. Just take it, or feel ignorant about it or stupid. It's not. It's just something that you just don't know yet, and it's something. Another life skill that you have to learn.
Well, and I'll
So
I'll tell you too, if there's somebody that is watching this and you're 13, 14, 15 years old, 16 years old, and you're truly taking in what we have to say and trying to understand it, because there's certain, you may feel like you understand it, but you'll learn as you grow that number one, you never stop growing, and that number two, there's certain things that you just don't understand until you understand them, right? And
until you can relate to them.
exactly. So don't, like Lucky said, don't take it as discouragement. Try to understand that if you are watching this and you're trying to understand our perspective and you're trying to take these things seriously, that puts you further ahead than 99% of your peers. Because
Agreed.
I'm going to be honest with you, like at 14, 15, I probably wasn't thinking about this kind of stuff. I wasn't
At,
thinking about,
at 15 years old, I was stealing cars and doing everything I could to buy my next uh, envelope of cocaine.
I
So you
mean,
guys are doing way better than I did.
I was playing football and I was smoking weed with my friends. Like, I mean, and avoiding my schoolwork. Like that was my life at
Yeah.
14, 15. So, um, I think that definitely, it puts you ahead of the majority of your peers, and I think that if you're really trying to take this in and you're willing to kind of just listen to what we have to say, like, that's going to put you guys ahead. And if you do take in this advice and you start to implement it, and you are very disciplined, this will probably be one of the key things that helps you succeed, not just in competitive Fortnite, but in life in general. Because,
We're not just talking about gaming here. We're talking
right,
about life skills.
this is a life skill. Being able to manage burnout and being able to set boundaries are things that you need to be able to do in your life, because people will try to take advantage of you. That's just the way that it is. That's the way that life is. That's the way that human beings are. And so you have to be ready to protect yourself against that. And you don't have to make the same mistakes that I have or that Lucky has. And I know, especially for me, like I've made myself look worse than, I probably made myself look bad in situations where I definitely was justified in reacting the way that I did, but because of the forum in which I was handling it, there's a certain behavior that's expected of you. So if you are doing these things and you are able to start implementing these things, it will save you from making a lot of the same mistakes that, both the two of us have. And I know we're just a couple of old men rambling from a lot of your guys' perspectives, but I promise the information, the knowledge that you guys are getting from us right now will save you a ton of trouble in the future. And that's kind of why we're doing this.
Yeah, I mean, there's. I wish that I had heeded the advice of my elders, not with to sound like I'm being condescending.
Well, we all say that, right? Like, I mean,
Uh,
I'm 26, man. I'm 26, and I wish I had listened to older people's advice at times. There's I think that my rebelliousness is a big part of the reason why I'm at where I'm at and why I've been able to succeed and why I didn't just go get a normal 9 to 5. Um, that being
yeah,
said,
I get that. I've always been very independent and
yeah.
rebellious too.
Well, that being said, the path that I've chosen to go down is very difficult. I'm not gonna say that I would. I think I would be. I think I don't think I'd be happy going down that other way. You know what I mean? Like I. So
I've done the
I'm not.
nine. I've done the 9 to 5 thing, not for a long time,
Yeah.
but I've done it, and it's every bit as horrible as you imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm miserable, like living the life that I live, but it's difficult. Like it's hard. It's hard work. You're not always gonna get paid. People are gonna screw you over. You have
Mhm.
to invest a lot of time into trying to build something up before you even sniff a dime. Like I think what a lot of people don't realize about me was like all of a sudden I just showed up, right? Like, oh, I'm in an Oceanics video now, and then I'm working with Trippern, and I'm working with Trippern for the FNCS Invitational, and now I'm working with TK, and I'm working with Ritual, and now I'm working with Reet, and I'm working with I've worked with all these different pros, and I think what a lot of people don't realize was that I played the game, and to be quite, I mean, in my opinion, I was pretty good, especially right before I started coaching, and then even when I was coaching, I thought I was pretty good. My issue was always like again managing relationships and finding teammates to play with that were, that actually saw my value. Um,
I understand that.
um, I don't think I got to a place where, but I was playing the game for basically since it came out, so for almost 4 years before I started coaching. And that was why when I started coaching, I was able to succeed so quickly. That and the fact that I felt like I had something about myself to prove. You know what I mean? Like I felt like, hey, you know what? Everyone before has not seen my value. Everyone before this has not seen my value, and that got me in front of, that desire to prove myself was what got me in front of a lot of these players because I think it resonated with a lot of them. I think they kind of understood like, hey, this guy, number one, he's smart. He can teach us things. We think that he can help us, but number two, he's kind of like us in a sense. Because I think at its core, I think a lot of these guys are trying to prove their value through their placements. I think
Well,
that's
and I mean that's an age thing in seeking validation.
of course. I'm
Um,
not, and I don't hold it against them. I understand that it's just
oh,
the
it's the
way that
nature
it
of the
is.
beast.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, and for the younger people out there, again, as you get older, you will care less about what people think. I promise you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was something that didn't really click for me until the past 6 months, to be honest with you.
It's that is the key to happiness,
Oh yeah.
is to not care about other people's opinions
Yep.
and low expectations. Those two things together, if you can have those, if you keep your expectations nice and low of other people, not yourself, of other people, and if you keep your if you can keep oh my god, I just derailed my train of thought. Low expectations. Oh, and not caring about other people's opinions, you will lead a happy life.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So that was my conversation with OG Lucky. I had a blast talking to him. I think he's a great dude, great person, somebody that does a lot for the community through hosting different scrims and zone wars and things like that for people to participate in and get great practice in. If you guys found this video helpful and you enjoyed this conversation and this style of content, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and then check out my other social medias link below. Thanks, guys.